The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome to our ICTM webinar. We are very excited that for this webinar we have a special guest. It's a featured presenter that is going to actually be at NCTM Regional, which is coming up very soon. It's at the end of November. Early bird registration is until November 3rd. So if you are thinking about attending, you can get a group rate if you get a group of teachers together or go by yourself, but either way, early bird registration goes until November 3rd. So be thinking about that as you're watching this webinar today. So I wanted to introduce our speaker though, because it is a special guest for us. It's Elham Kazemi. She is a professor of mathematics education at the University of Washington and co-author of Intentional Talk, which I actually have that book, so I'm very excited as well because I'm kind of an edu fan. She's involved in a number of partnerships with schools and school districts to design collaborative and school-based professional learning experiences for teachers. She supports teachers and instructional leaders to lead professional development that centers on learning from children's mathematical thinking and classroom experiences. I'm Annie Forrest, and I moderate our ICTM webinars. I'm on the ICTM board. And today, this is going to be a little bit of an interactive webinar. So questions that you have during or times that are appropriate for participating, you can type them in the questions area of the screen. Those questions will go to Elham and to me, but the whole group does not see them. So other participants will not see them, but the presenter and the moderator will, just to kind of give you a heads up on how the platform is going to work. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and try sharing my screen here and turn it over. Oh gosh, let's see. And let's see, there we go. Change presenter. Okay, there we go, that should work.
That's great. Hi, everyone. I'm Elham. Thank you for being here with me today. If you wouldn't mind, I'm really going to make this quite interactive. So if you could type in the question box, introduce yourself, maybe tell me and others what grade level you teach or what role you play in education, that would be great. And we can see who's here. And I'm going to show my screen to get us started. So you can see this lovely birthday cake, right?
Yes.
Okay. Everybody see this? Hey, Molly. I know some folks. So let me see if I can pull this. How do we see more of what people have typed? You just have to make the screen bigger. Like stretch it out a little bit. Oh, I see. If you click on it. I see. Okay. If you click on it, you can see what people wrote. Okay. So Molly's math consultant, Ron's a 5th grade teacher, math methods, math ed courses, 5th graders. Okay. Keep typing in, everybody, to introduce yourselves. The theme of our webinar today is listening carefully to children's thinking and being surprised by what they have to teach us. So I'm going to go through a couple examples with you all, and I hope that this will provoke for you the importance of finding out how students are thinking when they're solving math problems, and also what they think about participating in math discussions. So the first half we'll talk about kids' ideas, and then in the second half I hope to be talking with you about the way kids feel and interpret what it means to participate in a math discussion. Okay, so I don't think everyone has introduced themselves, so don't be shy, please do. Some upper grade teachers and teacher educators. It's a good mix. So if you are just logging on, please introduce yourself in the question box. And while people are doing that, I want you to take a look at this picture. This is a drawing a first grader made of a problem that was posed to her. How do you share, how would 4 children share a cake equally so that each child gets the same amount? So if you wouldn't mind, take a look at the work before I tell you very much about the child's thinking. And what is your guess about how the child, her name is Ellen, how she solved the problem? So again, I'd love for you to type into the question box. And Annie, you'll have to tell me, is this where I can be brave and just have people raise their hands if they want to participate?
You could definitely try it. I haven't tried it myself yet, so.
I don't know, let's try it. If it doesn't work, we won't do it. So does everybody see, do you want to explain how they can do that, Annie?
Yes, and George, if you could jump in too, because I know you see attendee view, so I don't know what the attendees actually see for raising their hands. But there should be a spot where attendees can raise their hand if they have something to say, and then we have control over answering those.
Yes, and we can see if their hands go up, we can turn on their mics so they can talk if they have an active microphone.
Okay, so if you have an active microphone and you can raise your hand, I think it looks like Ron and Jackie and a few others. Oops, did you just lose my screen?
No. We have your screen. It's just a
we lost the slide. There it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Somehow I lost it. Okay, let's see. George has his hand raised. Anybody else?
I don't think anybody has a hand raised yet, but there are a number of questions.
Ron.
Oh.
There goes a few. There's a few brave people.
Good. Here, I'm going to unmute you, Ron, and you start us off. Go for it, Ron.
Oh, am I just asking the question, or am I interpreting the child's thinking on this one?
Yeah, what do you think the kiddo did?
I think just looking at, they took a whole cake, and they, despite the size of it, each kid would have received one piece of cake. So this could have been 4 large pieces of cake, 4 small pieces of cake. I think the child just thought that each kid would get a piece despite size. It didn't have to be the same size. They would just have received a piece of cake each.
Okay. So thanks for sharing. Molly, I'm going to unmute you. Do you have anything to add? Let me see if I can do this. Hold on. Okay, I think you're unmuted.
Okay, I see in the cake itself 3 looks like diagonal lines that may be their attempt to divide, and then by each of the 4 people, a square, which I'm guessing may be their representation of the piece of cake that they received.
Nice. So, and a few of you, oops. Hang on, I didn't want to quite go onto this one. So, some people are noticing the diagonal lines and wondering what the squares are. Are they plates or are they pieces of cake? I don't know if you noticed that one of the kiddos has a little triangle on their head, the third one, right here. Do you see my cursor?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is what Ellen said about this piece of work when she was being asked. When she first got asked to share how would 4 children share a cake, she reached for some manipulatives, but then stopped and seemed puzzled by how to begin. So the teacher prompted her by saying, how about drawing a cake? And so she happily complied. She drew a birthday cake on a plate. So there's a plate that the cake is sitting on. Do you see that oval underneath there? And then the cake has icing, and it has 3 candles for her brother. She then drew the 4 people in her family, after which she quickly sliced the whole cake into 4 pieces and gave each person 1 piece and said each person gets 1 piece. Pretty clever, huh? So what do you notice, what do you think is interesting about the way she draws this cake? Is it the way that you would have thought a child would have drawn a cake for a math problem? So I'm going to keep asking you when I ask questions to feel free, yes, depending on the grade level, to type in answers so you can see each other's thinking too. So what's interesting to me is that she draws this cake from the side perspective rather than from, you know, an overhead. She definitely personalizes this situation, thinking about the people in her family. And then those diagonal cuts sort of remind me of what it's like to cut a cake, right? So she's really thinking about sharing the whole cake, but relating the piece that she gives with the piece from the cake. You know, there's a level of abstraction there that's pretty fascinating. So now what I want you to do is this other drawing that you've seen a peek at a few times. She here is being asked to share a cake among 8 people. So I want you to study it for a few seconds. What in the world do you think is happening here? And what do you notice about her drawing? What do you notice? What do you wonder about? And could you please type in your ideas in the question box? And then I'm going to ask a few of you to share what you notice. So Molly just shared, she thinks that she divided 20 pieces and gave each of them 3 equal sized pieces. She shared with 8 people equally. It seems she also gave herself some cake. Did she make 8 cuts that resulted in 9 pieces? So she crossed one off. We wonder why the kids have 4 boxes though. Good questions. Eight pieces. Someone's noticing that maybe she cut those 8 pieces in half. And we're not sure what she's doing over here on the right side. It's curious, isn't it? Now, sorry, I keep touching my keypad and it makes things slice back and forth. So one of the things that I've been fascinated about in learning about children's thinking is that we do often collect student work and look at student work because we think it'll tell us something about how the kids are thinking. And what I've been fascinated by is the fact that often the student work is really just a trace of a child's thinking, and it's not until you talk to them that you really understand their thinking process. And there's a lot here to wonder about, right? What are all those lines? Which came first? What was she thinking about? And we have some ideas here about what she might have done. So let me read to you the way the exchange with the adult went as she tried to explain and as she watched her do this problem. So remember the first cake was her brother's cake? Well, this time she drew a very large birthday cake with, of course, icing with that same side view. and decorations. And so this time there are 6 candles. Do you notice that? And that's for her own birthday. She drew herself with her party hat. So here she is, right here, and 7 other friends, right? So we've got 8 people all together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's Ellen and her 7 friends. This time she also cut the cake into pieces. But one of you thought that she had made 9 cuts, made 8 cuts, which resulted in 9 pieces. So that, in fact, is the first thing that she did. These slices that are, these lines that are going diagonally, are the first lines that she made. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if you can kind of imagine all of these lines not being there, she's ended up with 9 pieces, okay? Hopefully you're with me. And then she says, like many kids do when they're learning to fair share, I'll just save that for later, right? Because everyone's going to get 1 piece that way, and there's going to be 1 left over. And the teacher says to her, well, what if we wanted to try to eat the whole cake with all the friends, right? We don't want to save that leftover piece for later. What can we do so that everyone has the same amount? So that's where someone who had noticed she also had a line that cut all the pieces in half. That's when she drew this line. She was thinking about how could she share the whole cake equally. But what happened there is that after she counted the pieces, of course, she's going to end up with with 18. So there's still going to be these leftover pieces. So the first 2 big pieces here that she's drawn for each of these people are the 2 big pieces of the cake, okay? If anything's not making sense, just feel free to type in your question. But hopefully you're with me so far on what's happened. So she's going to have these 2 big pieces left over, right? After distributing these first 2 big pieces to everybody. So she finds that there's still extra, even if everyone now has 2 pieces. So then what she does, which I find kind of curious, is she knows that the 2 pieces at the end aren't enough for all 8 people, right? So she cuts the last 2 pieces into 3 each. And she has 12 pieces because she also cuts them in half. So she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And she distributes those, and she has these 4 pieces left over. So what she does with this, she uses her halving strategy again. And this time, when she halves them, she has exactly 8 pieces, which she can then distribute. So the portion for each person is 2 large pieces, a medium piece, and a small piece. Pretty cool, huh? So she figures out how to share this entire cake evenly, even though she doesn't know the fractions names for all of these pieces, but continues to cut in half and distribute until she's given away the whole cake. And if you just look at this child's work, you might wonder, well, does she get it? And I want to ask that question. And again, if you could put your answers in the question box, what do you think she does understand by what I just narrated to you produce the student work? So you're thinking about, what is she getting? What does she understand? The idea of equal shares. She understands dividing by equally sharing conceptually. She understands that each child gets the same amount. Is a student in kindergarten. I think she's a first grader. Just about to turn 6. Probably early in the fall of first grade. Anything else people think? She's attempting to share equally. Even though her cake pieces differ in shape, they're not drastically different from one another. I think it's interesting that she does understand that some of the pieces will be the same size and some will be smaller and some will be even smaller. So even though she doesn't have a sense of what to call these pieces, she's sort of thinking about them in relative size to one another based on how she cut the cake. It's pretty cool. So I think one lesson that I want you to think about is sometimes we see a child doing something and they're going down some path that we think isn't as efficient or may not lead to the right answer the way we are expecting. And we kind of want to maybe stop them and or guide them into a new direction. But if we let kids go in the direction that they're going, I think we can learn a lot about what they're thinking about, what they're understanding that might be actually fruitful for instructional purposes than to make their work all look the same. Because you would think, oh, let's not have her draw the cake from this angle because that's not the way we typically do fair sharing problems. But it kind of makes sense that she's drawing it from this perspective, the way she's thinking about these slices going through the whole cake. And it kind of mixes both the side view and the top view by the way she cuts them in half too, which I find kind of fascinating. But that's one of the things that I've learned to try to not always steer kids in the canonical way that we want to, but let the problem solving run its course to see what it is that we can learn from kids. So that's why I wanted to share this first example. Egyptian fractions. Annie, someone is asking, are attendees supposed to see all the comments because they can only see their own? It's not exactly like a chat window.
Yeah, I don't think the attendees cannot see the responses.
Oh, that's super helpful. Wait a second, but there's a chat window. What if we use the chat window? Can you see these? Because that's why you couldn't see each other's. Can you see that if I write in the chat window below, everybody? Let's try that.
Don't know if attendees have the ability to post to the entire audience in the chat, but I'm not sure. I don't know if George knows that or not, but.
Yeah, as far as
well,
I know, we don't have the ability to see each other's. There's only a question box for attendees in the webinar. So,
bummer.
yeah, that is a bummer. We can, if people raise their hands, though, we can call on them and unmute them, and we can narrate questions.
Okay, so I was sort of just reading them out loud, thinking that I was being redundant, but maybe that was helpful because you could hear what other people said. Okay, that's good. Well, I'm glad we figured that out because the next example, that was like our trial run. Okay, I still see a question window. Okay, all right, we'll figure it out. The next one we're gonna look at is a video example. This goes along with the same thread of what can we learn from kids if we don't step in and sort of course correct ourselves when we see them going off, and really kind of live with their ideas and their questions that they're asking to see what that teaches us about what they do know, and what might be instructionally fruitful. So I'm going to escape out of this view and find a video that I want to play real quick. So I think to be really have fun with this, we need you to be willing to raise your hands and participate verbally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show a piece of the video, and then I'm going to pause and I'm going to say, so what did we learn about these kids so far? What do you notice? And I'd love it if you would raise your hand and be willing to share what it is that you notice. It'll make it a lot more fun for all of us to do this together. Okay, so now you can see the video, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let me tell you the story here. You're going to hear my voice and a colleague of mine, Deborah. And one day we were working with a group of teachers interested in helping them see the value of children counting actual objects in school, way beyond what they normally do. This is part of an instructional activity that I've worked with many teachers called Counting Collections.
We actually had a webinar last week about counting collections. we had a webinar about counting collections, so if anyone attended that, they would have heard about that last week.
Oh, super. And if you haven't and would like to learn how to do it, and there are some really fascinating things that kids can do with counting collections across the grade levels, not just in the primary grades, which has to do with the way you record and group and count your collection. So if you're an upper grade teacher and you want to hear more about that, let me know and I'll give you some examples. But the reason why I'm using this one in particular is just to notice the really smart ways that kids stumble into problems together and the way that they try to solve them. And then our tendency as teachers to want to provide support and where we want to provide support. So I want you to kind of notice what I say and do and what you think is going through my head as I'm watching these two work. And then let's have a conversation about what we learned from this pair. So this is a pair of girls who I think might also be first graders. I sort of forget now, but I think they're about in first grade. And we're interested to see how they'll figure out to work together as a pair to count a collection of objects. And I have a collection of little buttons that actually came from the top of vaccine tubes that a pediatrician had saved and contributed to a counting collection in a classroom. So let's watch, and I'm going to pause it a bunch of times and we're going to talk about what we notice and what we wonder about the kids.
So we have this bag of stuff. How many do you think are in there? Can you make a guess?
109.
109, that's a really specific guess. How many do you think are in there?
100.
100 exactly. All right, let's find out. You want to find out?
Okay, so here's your challenge. You get to count this one bag, but there's two of you. So you have to figure out how to work together to count how many are in there. Do you think you can come up with that? Do you want to make a plan to do that? Why don't you talk to each other and make a plan about how to do it? I'm going to just pour them out for you. How do you think you could work together to count these?
Asya can have a half, and I can have another half, and I can listen what number she's at, and then I can do the next number.
What do you think? So she'll start counting, and then you'll continue. You want to do that?
Can you try that?
Okay.
One.
Oh, you say one, then she says the next one? Is that what you're thinking? Okay.
Two.
Okay.
3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. 11. 12. 13. 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36.
Okay, that's our first pause. Who's willing? Can I have a few hands? People willing to share what they noticed the girls were doing? Okay, Anne, you start us off. Anne, you're on, I think. Are you talking? Oh.
It says the attendee is
okay,
there she is.
Can you hear me
There she
now?
is.
Okay, sorry. It's interesting. I've never had students do that where they were kind of counting they separated the collection and counted them together. They were taking turns and then, but at the same time pushing out the same number. It was interesting. Yeah. I like that. I've never seen that before.
What was in theory, what were they supposed to do? What was the plan?
I'm trying to think back to that. I got so caught up in what they were doing. I mean, I think, I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries. I mean, in theory, they're supposed to pull a button out and say a number and then wait for the other person to say the next number.
Okay, okay. Yeah, they got so into it, they stopped taking turns and were kind of doing it together in a way. Am I right with that?
Yeah. Yeah, in a way, it kind of ended up that sometimes they were saying the number one alternating, and sometimes they're saying it together, right?
Yeah. But I've never had students do that. It was just interesting.
Let's see if Ron noticed the same thing or had a different idea. Ron, what did you think?
Yeah, I noticed that, but I want to kind of jump back a little bit. I like the idea. Did she say she needed to make a plan? Was that the girl that said that?
No, I
thought
did.
that was. Oh, okay. I thought the young lady said that, but I think she understood that she needed to break the pieces in half. She understood half as meaning break apart, even though her method in which she did it was incorrect. But she did seem to have a general understanding that to break apart something would mean to break it in half, even though she was kind of eyeballing the half a little bit. She was sharing, but her method of counting was very interesting, the methodology in which she did so, and I think she had the right premise at the beginning, but the act in which they went about counting would have resulted in a number not where they needed to be.
Right. So they've split it up. They've split up the work, I think, right, to share it. And she just very, in a gross way, said, here's half for you and half for me. Now I count, then you count, then I count, and then you count. But like Anne noticed, sometimes they end up like saying the same number, right? And so it doesn't quite work. So
I just had one question. I wondered if you had asked her to do it by herself, what her, like if you asked her to break that bag of buttons apart in half by herself, I wonder what her method would have been.
Yeah, for sure. That's a curiosity, right? What's adding that you have to work with a partner here, how does that change the task for them? Mm-hmm. Does anybody want to comment? Do you remember what they said at the beginning when we said about how many do you think are in here? And one girl said 109 and one girl said 100. What do you think of that? Does that surprise you? Where do you think they are getting those numbers from? If you raise your hand, then I'll be able to unmute you. Don't be shy. I don't know if you have your own students make estimates. Here, okay, where's Cheryl? Let's see what you think. Okay, I think that you're unmuted, Cheryl. I hope, anyway. Do you have your video or your audio unmuted yourself, Cheryl? And Anne's wondering, did she pick 100 because it's a friendly number? Molly says she doesn't think they were bad estimates. So Cheryl, I've unmuted you, but I don't know why we can't hear you. Will you type if you're trying to talk so I know? Let's see, Elham's one comment. Cheryl's trying, okay. I'm just going to leave you unmuted to see if you can make it work. So just pipe in, Cheryl, if it does. I think it's kind of curious, like why 109 and why 100, and what do children think estimates are? And do they kind of think of it just a big number? What does 100 even mean to them? So that's kind of curious. Be thinking about that. I'm going to roll this back just a tiny bit, and we're going to keep watching and see what happens with this pair. Here we go.
27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46. I can mix that.
What's going on? Is that working out?
No.
Oh.
Why not? We're saying it at the same time.
What can we do about that?
Maybe we should just find another way to do it.
What do you think? Yeah. So what's another way?
I have a way. We could do a whole line, and I go first, and then Alcia goes second, then I go, and then Alcia goes, and we can count all of those.
Does that sound like a good idea?
Do you want to try that?
Let's try it.
How about if I just have you do it with one of your piles? Or, well, let's see. You go ahead. Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, that's our second pause. Let's see if we can share. What do we notice? What happened in this next segment? And please, if you would raise your hands again. Molly, I'm going to try to unmute you. Here we go. Molly.
I think that they recognized that they were losing. Not only were they double counting, but they were also losing track of what had already been counted. So I'm anticipating they're going to maybe take turns, maybe put 3 out, then the next one put 3 out, and continue the count in sequence.
Okay. And what's your sense of what's going on here between the two girls? Are you thinking about that? Like, who's doing what and what you make of their participation so far?
I can't really tell who's talking, because we can't see them. So I don't know if one's being more dominant, but I'm trying to correct the rest, but maybe that.
Yes, this girl with the white shirt whose hand we can see,
yes.
she's the person whose voice we've heard the most so far.
Okay.
What would you make of that if one girl is doing more of the talking? What would you be thinking about?
Oh, I want to make sure the other one is understanding why.
Yeah.
Why they want to change the count, and maybe we'll see whether or not it was clear to her on why they're trying it differently.
Yep. Yep, I'm thinking about that too, and I'm wondering, is this person sort of taking over, and what is this other person thinking about the ideas? Because so far, she's really directed their work. And would you like to add something here?
I was just thinking, I mean, at first I thought maybe they were just paralleling, like a parallel but separate. They weren't collaborating. They were just kind of each doing it without the other one taking each other's moves into consideration. Like, I don't know, like sometimes like kids just separate and they don't really join in and collaborate and listen to each other.
Right.
And that's kind of what I see even with my older students sometimes. Like they want to still do it independently and not really listen to each other. And it's getting them to kind of listen in to each other.
And then did you catch me try to change the task for them once they come up with this plan?
Yeah, I mean, I like that they were starting to like try to organize their thinking, like build some kind of maybe structure or do something. I don't know. That's my thinking behind it, not theirs. Wishful thinking. I don't know.
Now she thinks if we make a line together, right, then we're going to be able to not count the same ones at the same time, because we'll be able to see this line. And then if you saw right before I pause, I'm like, here, let me take half of this away and you guys just work with one pile, and then I stop myself. And that's me really trying to see, why am I trying to make this easier for them? Let me just see what they do with the fact that they have two piles, right? And I think that that's an instinct I have a lot as a teacher that I sometimes have to squash down is not helping the kids out so that I see them be more successful the way that I want them to be successful. So I went to make the task easier, and then I was like, caught myself. I was like, well, no, I gave you this whole bag. I want to see what you do with it. And I think that that's really important. It has become really important to me to catch myself in those moments.
I would be at risk, I think, of watching them make the line and then hoping they would make another line so they'd see that how many are in one so they could repeat that. And I'd be afraid, like I could see myself funneling them right into that instead of waiting. Like just, yeah.
Yeah, and Ron is asking in the question window, is this the same as wait time? Do you mean me like stopping myself? I think it kind of is, like being patient. Like, what's the rush here? I don't have to have you do something exactly the way that's my thinking, because then I'm imposing my thinking on yours. And I think that's such an important lesson in learning from children, is like their ideas. And also what I was kind of excited about, which I think we'll see in a couple minutes, is what I learned from these two girls because I didn't interfere to make them do things in a way that I thought would be more efficient. Kind of like with the cake problem. You could have said, here, let me draw a cake for you that you can slice up, so that it wasn't from this side angle, but like what you learned about the way she thought about relative size and the leftover piece, because you kind of just let her keep having to solve the problem. So with that, let's watch a little bit more and see what happens.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30.
Is this working? Is this working better? Okay, keep going.
31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46. Where's my line?
Got a little jumbled up, huh?
Did it get jumbled up?
And I don't think this could be 40
Why not?
because it looks very long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Oh, maybe this is 40, but
So cool. Okay, so I'm gonna pause there again. So much to see just in every couple minutes. What did you notice? What did you think about? Please raise hands. I'd love to hear from some more people too. Let's try Cheryl one more time, see if this works. Cheryl, we're coming to you. Okay, Cheryl. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Darn it. Sorry, Cheryl. You might have to type in what you're noticing. There isn't a way to troubleshoot this, is there?
I'm sorry, I don't know why
Bummer.
Cheryl's isn't working.
Okay, well, Cheryl, type in what you're thinking about, and I'll definitely share it out with the group. Let's see. Ron, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I was just wondering why the two girls didn't just sort of count separately within their own group to find out. And so as she was doing it, it was a very interesting method to line them all up. But I also like how she was noticing some of the errors in her ways as she kind of got around realizing that the table wasn't long enough, and she kind of circled back around into her own pile, which made it slightly more complicated. So it seems like I like this a lot in the sense that she's realizing through a couple of different methods already that her two methods might not be the best method. And I'm thinking that she might realize that they should probably count them separately, then do it as a team, and then come together with their numbers. But it's interesting that she's been able to find error in her method.
Yeah, I'm going to unmute Anne and Molly, too. Maybe you guys can also jump in.
I like that she said that she was trying to get a sense of the size. Like, I don't think that's 40, but then she went back and checked. Like, it was interesting that she was trying to estimate just visually, like looking, well, this is where I am, but then she went and looked at and saw that she was off.
Yeah, isn't that interesting, that little moment where she's like, I don't think this can be 40?
Yeah.
Especially because we asked them at the beginning, like, how many do you think these are? So when kids say a number and they say 100, and you're like, oh, yeah, that looks like, I think Molly or somebody said, well, those seem kind of reasonable estimates based just on our eyeballing of the bags. But what does, like, quantity mean to the kids? So I found, like, that was just a gem of a little comment, a little think aloud.
Yes.
That what does 40 even look like? And I'm going to recount it, and oh my gosh, yeah, I really do get to 40. And then, I don't know, Anne or Ron, what are you thinking? So all of the vocalization right now so far has been the girl with the white girl with the white shirt.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were watching this unfold, what would you be thinking about the partnership?
Definitely there's one person who's more dominant, and I think I would maybe try to ask, like, kind of more of those talk moves, like, can you repeat what she says? Can you add on to what she says? Like trying to get her to pull in, or asking her to speak first, like asking her by name, can you share your thinking so far? And wait
Right.
for have the other student wait.
Yeah. And you know, for me, someone who's written a lot about classroom discussions, I think about voice a lot. So I'm like, what is this other person thinking? Is she understanding? Is this person taking over? But she's also physically participating, which I was paying attention to. So I don't know if you notice, like, when her finger joins in to like point count. And she's moving the objects, although sometimes the other girl kind of moves more quickly.
Yeah, takes over, yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. I think at first I thought maybe the other girl might not have known how to do it, but if I recall earlier in the video, she was counting. The method they came up with, where they were alternating count, she was able to keep count. So that kind of showed me that she does know how to count. It just seems like she might be slightly more timid. She might be not as vocal as the other student, and she's been highly participative in the practice. She's shown some evidence that she knows how to do it. She does not seem to have the voice or like the ability right now to stand out from the other students.
Do you think it
yeah, go ahead, Anne.
No, I'm thinking, like, for you, is it important to have her speak more, or is it okay with you that you can see through her actions that she seems to understand? Like, what should the goal be, I guess?
What I think is interesting, again, what kids have taught me is I'm just right now trying to watch. I feel like this is also a place where I would be really tempted to jump in and say, now, what are you thinking? And you talk. But especially if I'm getting to know kids, because these are not children that were very well known to me, I'm learning to try to check myself and how quickly I deem a child as shy or outgoing or confused or struggling, you know, because it's like, well, does this girl know more than this other girl? And I think sometimes we really rush to add a label to a child's participation. And he was really non-verbally participating in really interesting ways. So I felt like, and I feel like the kids are teaching me to just, even with that, be more patient. Even as someone who loves to work on discussion, not to assume that I know what's going on for you when you're quiet. Because you'll see something really interesting is about to happen for someone who has been verbally not very highly participatory compared to the other girl. I definitely care about status, and I'm thinking, like, does she have more status in the classroom, and is that why she feels like she's more confident to say her own thinking? But even with that, I feel like, okay, let's see. Molly, I think you're unmuted. Did you want to add to our little conversation here?
No, everything sounds good so far. I'm just curious to see what happens next.
Okay, so I'm going to keep you all unmuted as we carry on, and I really hope there's a few others of you who are willing to raise your hands to join in what we notice next, okay? So let's see what happens. Dun, dun, dun.
Should we keep counting from there? 40. This was 40, right? So let's keep going.
41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 54, 52, 57, 58, 59, 40, 61.
So did you catch what happened there at the 50 and the 60?
Yeah, she corrected her. She got.
That's right. What was the correction?
Jumping to the next 10, like she jumped over a whole group of 10, right?
Well, the girl in the white shirt wants to go back to 30.
Oh, went backwards. Yeah, that's right. She jumped back. Yeah.
Yeah. So now this girl, Asia, I think is her name, she jumps in with the correct next decade number. And her voice starts to get louder now, which I thought was super fascinating. She's been listening this whole time. And then all of a sudden, when this other girl's unsure about the next number, she jumps in and says 50 and then 60. So let's keep watching.
Which one were you on? Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13. Seven.
47.
So she recounts that whole string and she gets to 47. What happened?
I don't think she was doing one-to-one correspondence.
Any other guesses?
Only counting her. I mean, I can't tell, but maybe she was only counting a certain color. I couldn't really recall.
So my guess is at this point that because she skipped, she after she got to 49, that she went to 30. That what happened here is because she wasn't counting out loud. Once she got to a number that she didn't know the next number, she jumped back to 30. So by the time she gets to the end of this string, she's at 47 because she's counted the 30s decade a couple of times. Just from that little bit that I saw when the other girl jumped in and gave her the next decade number. Do you buy that?
I have to say, I mean, possibly, but I maybe this is a side note of something I've noticed. She has, I mean, I'm thinking about like math perseverance and her ability to even go back so many times to find the error or figure it out. I think that's pretty impressive for a young student like this.
Yeah, completely, right? Like,
yeah, she could easily give up on this problem if she wanted to.
yes. And the investment here in counting this big group of objects, instead of saying this is way too much for us, I'm not going to do this, is really impressive. So based on my thinking about why she got to 47, I'm going to ask them to count out loud for me, but to do it together so I can hear both of them count, because so far also I haven't heard as much of the other child counting. So this is a little bit of my intervention to hear some more from the other student as well. So watch and see what happens.
3, 49.
Can I make a suggestion? Can I hear both of you count together the whole long line? I'd love to see it. Do it out loud together though while you point. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 36, 37, 38, 39, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62. We already did this one.
Oh, you were watching really carefully.
You were.
Do your best counting again. Just that big long string.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 30, 31, 32,
59. What's after 59?
60,
59.
60,
60. So this was 59. Oh, which one was 59?
That was right, 59, and then
60.
Okay, what did you share?
Seems
So
like they
what
lost. It seems like they lost track of the purpose of the counting. They sort of, I can't tell if it was my computer, but it seemed a little laggy. It looked like they were just, toward the end, just counting numbers, and they kind of lost track of actually keeping track of how many were there. So they showed that they could count up to 59 or 60, but I don't know if they were still keeping track and just moving at a really swift pace to count as fast as they could. But I couldn't tell though from the video. I don't know if my side was laggy or not, but it seemed like they were just sort of counting and not keeping track of how many were actually there.
What do other people notice?
Well, I wondered at one point if they missed the one out and the one off a little bit, the light green one. It seemed like they lost that one as they were going up near the corner.
Yes.
And I was just like, oh man, like I was having a hard time keeping track of them, keeping track of it after a while. I was like, whoa. It was just, yeah, they did build momentum, but I felt like they left at least that one out, at least one of those or two of those times through.
Well, I think this is what's so interesting is that they're actually, as a partnership, bringing different issues to it, right? So they've organized it in this a little bit of a snake, right? Their line gets a little jumbled up. So where there's a lot, like all jumbled together, they sort of sometimes miss one. And one is watching the other and saying, wait, I think you missed this one. So then they go back and do their most careful counting. But this other girl who you're wondering, like, is she not as good a counter? Is she understanding what their strategy is? Do they know what she's doing? Then she jumps in and offers the help to this student when they get to the decades that she doesn't know the numbers. You know, with the 50 and the slides. Consistent. So, oops, sorry. I'm just going to meet you all in case that was why there was a feedback here. But because we're already at the end of our hour. But I kind of wanted my whole point about the hour that I wanted to spend with you today is for you to try in the next week or two that you're working with students to just take some time and follow their thinking without inserting your own and seeing what kids tell you that that surprises you or that gives you something more to work with than the assumptions maybe we bring into what kids can do. So both in the way that this two work together as well as what I learned because I didn't insert myself in, that one girl had, they were thinking about quantity, they were thinking about strategy, they were thinking about keeping track. So whatever math it is that you're working on at whatever level, I hope that you'll you'll make some space and time to slow things down and listen to how your kids are thinking. And that's really my big message to you. And I think it's already been an hour. Is that right? We have to say goodbye.
Yes, very powerful message though, and I really, it was fun to have the interaction of the participants in this webinar as well. So I appreciate you kind of pushing us to try something new as well. So, but yeah, I mean, these webinars are a powerful way to learn, but learning in person can also be very powerful. And so we're excited to see you in Chicago at the end of November as a featured speaker. So I wanted to remind everybody about that. I'm going to go ahead and change.
I'm just going to put a little plug into, if you are in Chicago, we're going to have a session with Christopher Danielson where we learn an instructional activity and get to rehearse it together. So if you have not had an opportunity to try that kind of thing out, come look for the session on Which One Doesn't Belong. I think it's Thursday afternoon. And at the NCTM annual, we're going to be talking more about what we learned from kids' participation in classroom discussions.
Awesome, thank you. I am just going to, last little thing here, wrap us up. So there'll be a brief after webinar survey. We would love if you would take a second to fill that out because it gives us a lot of good information for planning our webinars. And also if you are an Illinois educator and you need CPDU credit, in the follow-up email you'll get tomorrow, there's a link for getting CPDU credit that we can give you now. And all these webinars are brought to you by ICTM members. So membership helps us to do things like these webinars. So if you are not a member yet, go to ictm.org and consider joining us. And finally, like we've been talking about, NCTM Regional is coming at the end of November. Early bird registration ends November 3rd. So make sure you register if you are interested in learning and hearing some more speakers like we had today. So thank you everyone for joining, and we will see you at our next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks everybody.